In this week's session, we'll be exploring the concept of activist leadership. Today, we're going to explore leadership in the context of activism. Specifically, how purpose and values guide leaders in activist groups. We'll begin by asking, can purpose provide leadership for activist groups? We'll examine how a shared mission or vision can inspire collective action and sustain engagement, even in challenging circumstances. Next, we'll consider how activists work with diversity and difference to deliver democratic forms of leadership. What does it mean to lead inclusively, ensuring that all voices are heard and valued? And how do leaders navigate tensions within diverse groups to maintain collaboration and fairness? Finally, we'll focus on precarious worker activists and the kinds of leadership they practice. How do activists in precarious work contexts mobilize, organize, and make decisions under conditions of uncertainty and instability? Throughout the lecture, we'll analyze examples, discuss key concepts, and consider how theory translates into practice in activist leadership contexts. Firstly, today we are going to talk about purpose. The notion of having a purpose in leadership seems like a very important one. Without purpose, much leadership practice could be interpreted as being somewhat pointless. Can you imagine the leadership of Nelson Mandela and his allies, for example, as being worthy of note were it not for the purposes of emancipation and equality? Yet it is remarkable how few studies and theories of leadership regard purpose as a matter of concern. Perhaps this absence of purpose is related to the emphasis in leadership studies on profit-generating businesses, where the purpose behind such leadership as being to make more money and become more efficient is assumed and taken for granted. Yet even in business, many people go to work for purposes other than generating profits for their employers, such as delivering positive experiences for customers, or because of relations of care and kinship with their colleagues. The purpose of a group or organisation can shape how it develops its leadership practices, so it's important to learn more about how this happens. If an organisation is driven by the purpose of generating social equality, it's possible that its practices will follow more horizontal and inclusive patterns, resisting the idea of formal leaders who can tell other people what to do. Social movements tend to follow such leadership logics, as the notions of hierarchy and privilege are anathema to the values of this type of organisation. Take, for example, the environmental movement Extinction Rebellion, which has staged a range of direct action and protest events. On the Who We Are page on their website, they state, "We are you. You are so welcome to join us and participate. You don't need our permission if you agree to follow our principles and values." The obvious assertion here is that anyone can offer leadership in this group if they abide by its broad commitments, its purpose. This assertion is underlined by the structure of Extinction Rebellion, based on the activity of small and decentralized groups who operate according to equal and democratic methods. For some organizations, the purpose underlying their practice is so strongly embedded that it, in itself, does the work of leading. In this sense, purpose can be viewed as being equal to people and practices, as a thing that leads people. Purposes can outlast any individual leader or organisation member. The most obvious examples here are major charities or political movements, whose core values may remain fairly consistent over the years. It's also possible to flip this logic on its head and state that practices can influence an organisation's purpose. Through enacting new and alternative practices, groups can rethink their purpose as they grow an appreciation of alternatives. It's important to note, however, that organizations experience difficulties when there is a dissonance present between their professed purpose and values and their practice. Today, we're going to explore what makes activist leadership distinctive and effective. At the heart of it, vision and purpose are central. Activist leaders have a clear vision for a more just and equitable world, and they are driven by a strong sense of purpose to achieve social change. This purpose guides their decisions, actions, and the way they engage with others. Closely linked to this is courage and resilience. Activist leaders confront adversity head-on, challenge injustice, and persist even when they face setbacks or opposition. Their determination ensures that movements continue to push forward, even in difficult circumstances. Empathy and compassion are equally important. Effective leaders deeply understand the struggles of the people they represent and advocate for their needs, ensuring that their leadership is grounded in care and solidarity. At the same time, activist leaders rely on strategic thinking and innovation. They develop and implement effective strategies and tactics, adapting their approach as situations change and embracing new, creative ways to achieve their goals. Communication is another critical skill. Strong communication and persuasion allow leaders to articulate their vision clearly, mobilize support, and inspire others to take action. Complementing this is community building and organizing. Activist leaders excel at fostering relationships, creating solidarity, and mobilizing collective efforts to generate real impact. A deep commitment to justice and equality underpins everything they do. They fight against all forms of oppression and discrimination, ensuring that their actions align with core human rights principles. Self-awareness and humility are also vital. Activist leaders understand their own strengths and weaknesses, are open to feedback, and continually seek to learn and grow. Similarly, ethical and principled leadership ensures that they maintain integrity, even when faced with difficult decisions or pressures to compromise their values. Finally, adaptability and learning agility allow activist leaders to navigate complex, changing environments. They learn from their experiences, adjust strategies as needed, and remain effective in dynamic situations. Altogether, these qualities enable activist leaders to inspire and mobilize others, challenge the status quo, and work tirelessly towards a more just and equitable world. Activist leaders face a range of internal and external challenges that can impact both their well-being and the effectiveness of the movements they lead. Internally, the intense emotional and organizational pressures of activism can lead to burnout, fatigue, and mental health struggles, particularly when self-care is neglected in favor of the cause. Movements may also experience internal conflicts, where differences in ideology, strategy, or personal ambition create power struggles that hinder progress. Ensuring inclusivity and meaningful representation can be a persistent challenge, especially when working across intersectional identities and experiences. Additionally, sustaining long-term momentum can be difficult. Enthusiasm may wane over time, especially in the face of setbacks or slow progress. These difficulties are often compounded by limited resources, funding, infrastructure, and access to training or support, which place further strain on leaders and their organizations. Externally, activist leaders frequently confront repression, harassment, and even violence from state authorities or opposing groups, placing both their physical safety and emotional well-being at risk. Movements also risk being co-opted by mainstream institutions or corporations, which can dilute their core messages and compromise their goals. The media may misrepresent or distort the aims and actions of activist leaders, creating public misunderstanding or backlash that undermines support. Maintaining public engagement over time is another challenge, especially in environments saturated with competing political and social issues that divert attention. Finally, navigating political institutions can be complex and fraught. Engaging in negotiation or compromise may be necessary for progress, yet it can also alienate activists who view such actions as betrayals of core principles. These internal and external pressures illustrate the delicate balance activist leaders must manage while striving to create meaningful social change. Empty signifiers are broad, open-ended terms, such as freedom, justice, or the people, that do not have one fixed meaning, but instead allow different groups to project their own interpretations and emotions onto them. Their power comes from this very flexibility, as they can unite people under a shared banner, even when their individual understandings differ. We will explore this idea in more detail. An empty signifier is a word or symbol that does not have one fixed, concrete meaning, but instead carries a range of possible interpretations. The term is closely associated with Ernesto Laclau, who explained how certain concepts in politics and society become powerful precisely because they are vague or open-ended. Words like freedom, democracy, justice, or the people do not refer to one single, universally agreed-upon idea. Instead, different groups can project their own hopes, frustrations, and values onto these terms. Their meaning is therefore empty, not because nothing is there, but because the meaning is open, fluid, and contested. This flexibility makes empty signifiers especially influential in political movements and collective identity formation. When there is social dissatisfaction or a desire for change, people search for language that can express shared feelings without requiring precise agreement on policy or philosophy. Broad terms act as rallying points. They allow individuals who may disagree on specifics to still come together under a shared banner. For example, a protest movement may unify around the phrase, "We are the people," even though each participant interprets the phrase differently. The very vagueness is what enables unity, because the signifier can accommodate many different meanings at once. In this way, empty signifiers are not meaningless. Rather, they derive power from being symbolically charged, yet flexible. They provide a sense of solidarity, purpose, and emotional resonance, allowing diverse groups to feel aligned even without concrete consensus. The relationship between the universal and the particular is central to understanding how activist groups form shared purpose. Universal signifiers refer to broad ideals such as human rights, equality, or dignity, principles that are meant to apply to everyone and guide how groups define what is morally right or wrong. In contrast, the particular refers to the specific experiences, needs, and contexts of a certain community or group facing injustice. Activist leaders must balance these. They may rally supporters around universal values like fairness, but the moment they attempt to act on these values, they must translate them into particular practices. This is where challenges emerge. Because while many people may agree on the importance of a universal principle, they may disagree on how it should look in practice. As a result, groups often debate and sometimes clash over what their key signifiers, whether universal or empty, should mean in concrete terms. This process can be productive and clarifying, or it can cause fragmentation when disagreements are deep. Identifying a movement's key signifiers is not something that can be calculated. It comes from close involvement, observation, and understanding of the group's symbols, language. Democratic practice is deeply intertwined with the way activist groups and their leadership operate. These groups, which often challenge dominant power structures, tend to frame their organization and decision-making around principles of equality and participation. What is commonly described as a horizontal model of leadership. By rejecting hierarchical control, they aim to embody and enact the democratic ideals they advocate for. This commitment to democratic practice is evident not only in large-scale movements, such as Extinction Rebellion, but also in smaller, community-based initiatives, where egalitarian values and shared decision-making are integral to their identity. And democratic practice refers to an informal, everyday way of engaging with others, making decisions, and governing collectively. It is grounded in the idea that the people, the grassroots members of a group or organization, determine how they relate to one another and make collective choices in their daily work. Unlike formal representative democracy, where individuals vote for others to act on their behalf, democratic practice is a bottom-up process that emphasizes participation, collaboration, and shared responsibility. At its core, it involves relinquishing control, recognizing that leadership and decision-making belong to the collective rather than a single authority figure. Democratic leadership practice, however, introduces an element of direction within this participatory framework. While it still relies on democratic engagement, it focuses on guiding a group toward a shared decision or goal through inclusive and participative means. This differs from traditional leadership, which may be hierarchical or exclusive, and from democratic practice alone, which may not necessarily seek a concrete outcome. In essence, democratic leadership is about shaping a collective direction of travel through democratic processes. Underlying this approach is an acknowledgement of democracy's inherent imperfection and incompleteness. Democracy accepts that no one person holds all the answers, and that decisions must be made collaboratively, continually refined through participation and dialogue. It is an ongoing process, one that ceases to exist if people disengage. Because both democracy and those who practice it are imperfect, democratic leadership becomes necessary as a means of navigating uncertainty together, fostering collective learning and shared direction through continual engagement. Conflict can serve as a positive and productive force in fostering vibrant and meaningful forms of democratic leadership. Within activist organizations, conflict plays an essential role in helping groups expand their perspectives, challenge assumptions, and move beyond familiar identities. This process of constructive tension enables growth and renewal. Political theorist Chantal Mouffe, 2013, situates conflict at the center of democratic practice, describing it as agonism, a term that evokes discomfort and struggle. While many people instinctively avoid conflict, Mouffe suggests that, much like physical exercise, it is both necessary and beneficial despite its discomfort, as it strengthens democratic engagement and collective understanding. Mouffe distinguishes between agonism and antagonism. Antagonism represents destructive conflict, where opposing parties treat each other as enemies to be defeated or eliminated. Agonism, by contrast, involves engaging with difference constructively, treating opponents as legitimate adversaries whose challenges can provoke reflection and learning. This form of conflict encourages individuals and groups to critically examine their own beliefs, values, and affiliations. Movements such as Extinction Rebellion exemplify agonistic practice by using acts of civil disobedience and public disruption to compel society to confront uncomfortable truths about environmental degradation. MOVE argues that when genuine differences are suppressed or ignored, societies risk storing up deeper tensions that may later erupt in more violent, antagonistic ways. In activist or volunteer settings, the tendency to prioritize harmony or avoid confrontation can allow problematic practices to persist unchallenged, ultimately undermining collective goals. Agonistic conflict, while provocative, is therefore creative. It broadens understanding, exposes blind spots, and opens space for alternative perspectives and innovation. Nevertheless, integrating conflict into leadership practice requires skill and sensitivity. Poorly managed or insensitive conflict can inflict personal harm and damage trust, highlighting the need for thoughtful and empathetic facilitation within democratic leadership contexts. Within social movements, there is a widely held belief that the existence of a leader contradicts the principles of horizontal, collective organisation. Many activists committed to egalitarianism therefore seek to prevent formal authority figures from emerging, viewing leadership as inherently hierarchical and exclusionary. However, research suggests that leadership roles tend to arise even within the most horizontally structured movements. Gans, 2009, Smolovitch-Jones et al., 2016, Sutherland et al., 2016, 2014. This often occurs because certain individuals possess greater time, expertise, or skills that make them naturally more active or visible. Despite this inevitability, activist groups frequently strive to restrict the influence of individual leaders to preserve collective equality. This inherent tension, where horizontalist movements both produce and suppress leaders, has been described by Sutherland et al. 2014 as anti-leadership. The argument advanced by Sutherland and Smolovitch-Jones et al. 2016 is that the issue is not whether leadership exists, but rather what kind of leadership emerges and how it can be used to enhance the group's shared capacities. Leaders, in this view, are symbolic figures representing the kind of organisation the collective aspires to create. Characteristics of anti-leadership. Anti-leadership challenges conventional hierarchical models by promoting distributed and collaborative forms of organization. It involves rejecting top-down authority, encouraging individual autonomy, and decentralizing power so that decision-making is shared across the group. Such leadership fosters participation, aligns members around common goals and values, and emphasizes adaptability, empowerment, and mutual development. Potential benefits. When effectively practiced, anti-leadership can increase motivation and engagement as individuals feel genuine ownership of the collective process. It can also enhance creativity, problem-solving, and innovation by drawing on diverse perspectives. Furthermore, it enables greater adaptability to change and fosters a strong sense of community and shared purpose. Potential challenges. However, anti-leadership is not without its difficulties. The absence of clear authority can lead to a lack of direction, coordination problems, and slow decision-making. Managing conflict and ensuring accountability may also prove challenging, and without active vigilance, groupthink or free-riding behaviours may emerge. Balancing freedom and structure is therefore crucial to ensure that democratic ideals are upheld without undermining collective effectiveness. Democratic leadership can be understood through 4 interrelated perspectives that position leaders as symbols of democracy, shaped not only by their own agency, but also by the communities they represent. Viewing leaders as symbolic figures emphasizes that their authority and role are as much socially constructed by collective expectations as they are enacted through individual initiative. Smolovitz-Jones et al., 2016, illustrate this dynamic through a study of a women's rights organization in the Pacific, where the group's members actively define what leadership means in their context. They determine which forms of leadership, such as guiding, teaching, or modeling ethical conduct, are appropriate to particular situations. This process of definition happens both through direct confrontation, when leaders exceed their mandate, and through subtler, everyday interactions that communicate shared values and preferred approaches. In this sense, leadership becomes a democratic dialogue. The group continually negotiates and reaffirms what good leadership should look like. Horizontal activist movements, such as those focused on climate justice, often distribute leadership among many individuals operating across varied geographies and domains. These dispersed leaders might influence policy in local councils, advocate within national parliaments, or shape narratives through media and popular culture. This diffusion of leadership power not only reflects democratic values, but also mitigates the risk of activist burnout, as responsibilities and pressures are shared across the collective. Such an arrangement ensures resilience and inclusivity, preventing the emergence of overly dominant figures and reinforcing the idea that leadership belongs to everyone. Democratic leaders are also deeply embedded within their communities. Their legitimacy often stems from lived experience, having faced the same social, economic, or environmental challenges as those they represent. Leaders who have personally encountered poverty, discrimination, or injustice bring authenticity and credibility to their roles, enabling them to lead from within rather than above their communities. This rootedness in shared experience strengthens trust and fosters participatory engagement. Activist leadership can also function as a prefigurative practice, a concept explored by Graeber, 2013, whereby groups model the social and ethical ideals they seek to realize on a broader scale. In this view, leadership becomes not just a mechanism for decision-making, but a moral and political experiment in embodying alternative futures. For example, communal living initiatives that challenge conventional notions of property and labor relations enact democratic principles of equality, shared responsibility, and self-governance. By living out these values internally, such movements hope to inspire broader societal transformation. Ultimately, leaders as symbols of democracy embody key principles that sustain democratic culture. They are elected or chosen through fair and transparent processes, ensuring legitimacy and collective consent. They remain accountable to the people, maintaining transparency and ethical responsibility in decision-making. They uphold and protect human rights, defending freedoms of speech, belief, and assembly as non-negotiable foundations of public life. And crucially, they promote inclusivity and participation, cultivating environments where diverse perspectives can inform collective choices. Through these practices, democratic leadership becomes both a lived and symbolic expression of equality, participation, and ethical responsibility, one that continually evolves through dialogue, conflict, and collective action. Now please take a moment to do this week's reflection. Thank you for listening, and see you next week.